You may be seated. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold, your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold, your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. In these words, the Apostle John gives us another snapshot of Jesus on the cross. Among the gawkers, scoffers, soldiers, and thieves stood 4 women. John writes, "But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene." As Jesus hangs by the nails in his hands and feet, the 4 soldiers gamble for his clothing. In real pain, through bloodied eyes, he is thinking not of himself but of others. He is now living out. He is fulfilling what he had told the 12 at an earlier time, saying, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Even from the cross, while he is giving his life as a ransom, he is still serving in very practical ways in order to provide for the need of another. John writes, when Jesus saw his mother. Jesus sees his mother standing near his cross among 4 women. John does not say whether Jesus saw or didn't see the other women. But the point John emphasizes that he draws the focus upon in this freeze frame of the cross, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. John himself is this disciple, the disciple whom he loved. He is the youngest of the 12. In all the accounts of the gospel, John is the only one of the 12 that is recorded to be present at the cross, standing nearby. And John writes, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." At this point, Jesus has no property or even clothing. He is dying, and yet, upon seeing his mother standing nearby, the disciple whom he loved, Jesus provides for her. The Word, now flesh, speaks and creates a relationship that did not exist prior to that moment. Listen, hear it. "Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother." From the context, we understand that Mary is a widow standing before her dying eldest son, her firstborn, now lifted up, beaten, bloodied, executed. She had done everything right. More than circumcised on the 8th day, he had been redeemed with the sacrifice of a lamb according to God's commandment that accompanied the commandment establishing the feast of Passover. The command Moses records, "You shall set apart to the Lord all that first opens the womb. Every firstborn of man among your sons you shall redeem." What does this mean? By a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. Now, on this Passover day, old Simeon's prophecy at Jesus' dedication when he was only 8 days old haunts Mary as it is played out before her eyes. Simeon had spoken to her, saying, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and the rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed. And a sword will pierce through your own soul also, so that thoughts from many hearts may be revealed." Lovingly, gently from the cross, Jesus respectfully places distance between himself and his mother, saying, "Woman." Mary had heard her son address her this way before, and so had John. Respectful, yet not the usual way a son speaks to his mother. A few years earlier, after Jesus had called the 12, John remembers that Jesus spoke this way at a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and he records saying, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." Now, his hour had come. Now he offered his life as a ransom for many, and this is the moment for which he had been born. But even as he is doing this greater work, he still fulfills all the law. Here we see him still fulfilling the 5th commandment. "Honor your father and your mother as the Lord your God commanded you, that your days may be long, and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you." As the firstborn son, when his father died, it was his first responsibility to look after his mother until her death. Jesus now is dying. He could have left the matter for Mary's future, her shelter, her provision, her emotional care, all for his half-brother James. But Jesus does not leave anything undone, but rather acts doing that which is within his power and responsibility to do. So lovingly from the cross, he provides his mother with earthly provision of shelter, food, and physical care for her present and her future until her own death. We are confident of this because John writes, and from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. In that moment we know, and John knew when penning these lines, that Jesus is providing for his mother's life after her death, through his atoning work, through his own death on the cross. But John also knew Jesus did more for Mary on that day at the cross. He also made provision for her for the rest of her life until her death. And from that hour the disciple took her to his own home. But Jesus fulfilled the fifth commandment, the one with the promise, honor your mother, that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land. And he died as a strong, healthy, 33-year-old man. This is not the way the commandment fulfilled works. Honor your mother equals long life, right? Let us not forget his hour, this hour, in this snapshot from the cross, in these words that create a relationship between two people that did not exist before these words were spoken. Like Mary and John, we now come face to face with a paradox. We see an example of the great exchange, my sin for his righteousness. I, for one, have not honored my father and mother perfectly. I have not cared for the widow in need perfectly. I have not cared for the orphan in need perfectly. We all fall far short of this simple commandment with a promise, yet Jesus kept it and did not receive the promise. Rather, he was treated by God as if he had not kept it, and concerning this, Isaiah writes, by oppression and judgment he was taken away, and for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people? Jesus fulfilled the whole law perfectly. He was cut off out of the land of the living, struck down in the prime of his life for Mary, for John, for the soldiers, for me, for us, so that he may give us the promise due him for keeping the whole of God's commandments, so that he may give us his righteousness. The Apostle Paul declares, for our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And now, for us who have been freed from our slavery to sin, who have been given his righteousness and all the promises of God that are found in Jesus, are we now not free? Free to love in righteousness and provide for others, for the widow, for the orphan, for the foster child, for those unable to care for themselves, just as Jesus did for his mother. Providing for their practical needs as we also proclaim to them this good news. As Paul writes, for all the promises of God find their yes in him, that is Jesus. That is why it is through him that we utter our amen to God for his glory. Even while unjustly being executed, Jesus did not sin and so secured our redemption. In that hour, he honored his mother and certainly provided for her immediate benefit, but he also honored her for us, for both her and our eternal benefit. John even declares this good news for us while seemingly tucking it away in plain sight within these few words of affection from the cross. Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother. Let us stand and sing.